Okay. Yes. Across the lawn, the shadows fall as the evening sun sets on my empire. What is it with the British and their houses? You know, why do we have property porn programs like location, 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 and we don't have programs about buying washing machines called Revolution, Revolution, Revolution? I think it's because houses are an integral part of our cultural fabric. You know, the British want to own a property, and I bet there isn't a middle-class dinner party in the country where the topic of houses and their prices doesn't arise. And before the advent of video games, the old school property owners used to play their own game, a game of Second Life, really. And they used to stand in front of a giant screen, 10 foot by 6, and they would gaze through the screen at an estate agent's window, and they would look at properties that were tantalisingly out of their reach. And they would fantasise the lives that they would lead in these houses. They would imagine the extensions they would build, the gardens that they would create, the decor that they would have, the parties they would host, the cocktails that they would enjoy on the patio of a summer's evening. And a lucky few would be able to acquire enough tokens in the first life to be able to afford one of these properties. They would get a pay rise or a promotion or something, so they would get their dream house and they would move in. But the power of the fantasy only lasts so long, and reality eventually creeps home. And after about a period of 7 years on average, they start to think, actually, perhaps the room layout isn't quite as we'd hoped. Maybe the view isn't what we thought it would. Perhaps we ought to look to move. And I can only imagine that this restlessness has been going on for millennia. And that the very first estate agent, thousands of years ago, who sold Stonehenge to the ancient people there, must have done the same thing. And they all must have bought into it and thought, yeah, that sounds terrific, let's do that. And so they spent the best part of their lives building this thing. And then when it was eventually finished, they moved in, and presumably after 7 years, they started to think, it's a bit drafty in winter here, and the roof leaks. Actually, it doesn't have a bloody roof, you know. I think we ought to move, you know. Cathedrals next, that's what we're going to move into, cathedrals. And a friend of mine took all these photos. He lives in Devon, he's a photographer, and he does freelance work for posh estate agents. And he's met all the people who live in these houses. And the one observation he shared with me was that it doesn't matter how massive the house is, the owner generally lives in one room of the house. Any idea which room that might be? The kitchen, exactly. Because that's where the Aga is. So the room is generally warm. And that's where people go to eat. So however many people, the guests are in the house, they will end up in the kitchen where everything happens. And so it struck me that we've got it all wrong. Consumerism has convinced us that we need to go bigger and better. Whereas in reality, it doesn't matter where you live, because what makes a great place to live is not the buildings. It's not the structures, the views, the climate. It's actually the people who live in that area. It's the community that makes the place worth living. And it's ironic that the bigger the property, the more isolated people become. Thank you.